Hey everyone, it's Sevi. Penacony bellboy Misha is here to help us sweep the battlefield clean of enemies. This 4-star ice destruction character has a simple kit with a somewhat peculiar role, which I guess shouldn't be surprising from someone whose main weapons are a mop and luggages. So to help you understand and see if he's a good fit for you, this guide will cover his kit and traces, Eidolons, best relic and light cone builds, team synergies, and more. Let's begin. First, we'll start with Misha's ultimate, which is what his kit mainly revolves around. It has this hit per action mechanic that determines how many times his ult hits. The first will always go to the main target, but then the rest of the hits will randomly bounce to other enemies. Against one enemy left, all those hits will focus on it, which makes him more potent in single target scenarios. Basically, the less enemies there are, the better, to really focus his damage and reduce the RNG of his bounce hits. Misha always resets back to 3 hits per action, which is what his HUD's indicator is tracking. This can stack up to 10 times. And naturally, consistently unleashing it with high stacks is your main goal. Before each ultimate hit lands, he has a small base chance to freeze the target. While the base chance is pretty low, his ult will at least hit multiple times for more chances of freezing. This also has a low 100 energy cost, so it's going to be more spammable as his main damage source and means of freezing enemies. The rest of his abilities are simple and mainly designed to help boost his ultimate. With his talent, whenever any party member, counting Misha, uses a skill point, Misha gets 1 ultimate hit stack, and he also gains a very small amount of energy each time. This incentivizes having teammates that are, or can be, skill reliant to help synergize with Misha's hit stacking. Using Misha's skill deals blast ice damage and gives 1 ultimate hit, but since this consumes a skill point, he gains 1 ultimate hit as well thanks to his talent. Basically, that's 2 hit stacks per skill cast. His basic attack is just a single target hit with no special attribute or ult hits to add. However, there will be more specific playstyles wherein his basic attack gets used more frequently. Using his skill consistently, plus his talent's extra energy at a certain level, can effectively guarantee that he'll always have a 3-turn ultimate rotation time. In other cases where his teammates can spend the skill points frequently enough that he will already overcap on his hit stacking, it's possible to integrate a basic attack or 2 instead. His alternate support sub-DPS playstyle involves him doing a mix of basic attack or skills, or just purely basic attacks. In this case, he'll also be relying more on his teammates to stack his ultimate hits. But of course, there will be many scenarios where this can go faster, like killing enemies, getting hit, or receiving extra energy sources. And remember that you still want to have a high number of ultimate hits in order to maximize its damage and breaking potential. As for his technique, he creates a time-stopping dimension that traps any enemies caught in it, and when you initiate battle, that gives Misha an additional 2 ult hits at the start of battle. Now let's go through his Ascension traces. With the Ascension 2 trace, before his ult's first hit lands, it increases the freeze base chance by 80%. Then with Ascension 4, using his ultimate gives him a 60% effect hit rate until it ends. When combined with his A2 trace, that results in a high or guaranteed chance that your first hit freezes, unless your enemy is specifically resistant to being frozen. The subsequent hit chances will still benefit from this too, which is helpful when up against high-level enemies with high effect resistance stats. And with his Ascension 6 trace, he gets a 30% crit damage bonus against frozen enemies, a good damage boost. As you can see, his Ascension traces are all focused on capitalizing on his freezing capability and boosting his damage once they're frozen. His bonus stat traces are ice damage, crit rate, which are both useful for damage, and defense, which gives him some added tankiness. Prioritize his ultimate trace level followed by his skill. If you want to guarantee a 3-turn ult rotation using his skill every turn, you just need his talent to reach level 8. But again, just having other energy sources can already guarantee that even without leveling up his talent that high. The basic attack should just be left alone to save resources. If playing him as a free sub-DPS, prioritize his talent along with the ultimate this time. Then, whether he'll use his basic attack or skill more can depend on the SP consumption of your main DPS and team, but they'll generally be lower priority. With all that, Misha's kit has a clear focus on his hits per action mechanic and freezing capabilities. He can act either as your typical DPS with a freeze utility, which is a more traditional and easy playstyle to implement, or as a hybrid support sub-DPS where his freeze becomes very important to control the enemies at the expense of his damage potential. There's also the possibility of having no healer or shielder, and you're just really relying on his crowd control to keep your team alive until the fight ends. That allows you to just put in another buffer or debuffer that will maximize your team's damage. It's a way riskier play though, and not something I generally recommend. Also, if you already have limited 5-star destruction units built or in the process of being built, you should think twice if you still need or want to invest resources in him as a DPS. It's not that he won't clear content, it's just more of a return of investment comparison in relation to other DPSs. Personally, I wouldn't recommend building him at E0, and if you really want to, I would prefer to at least have Eidolons, but also not at the expense of risking your pity just to snipe his copies. But at the end of the day, even MOC is clearable with the right team and high enough investment, and simulated universe blessings can make even an E0 version of him feel busted. So if you really like him and don't mind all the meta considerations, then don't let me dissuade you. Either way, whether you're running him purely as your main DPS or as a sub DPS support, he gets noticeably better with his Eidolons, so let's see what they unlock in his kit. E1 is a great boost for him, as using his ultimate now adds to his hits per action based on how many enemies are present, and this can reach up to 5 stacks added. Those bonus hits can also actually exceed the default 10 hit limit, and while that's just an extra hit or two in 1 to 2 target scenarios, it's still extra damage and freeze chances in any case. With E2, each ultimate hit now has a 24% base chance to reduce the target's defense by 16% for 3 turns. Defense tread is always great, and it scales higher when stacked with other sources of defense tread or ignore until it caps. Even with a low base chance, the multi-hit nature of the ultimate plus his innate effect hit rate bonus can still make it likely to apply, especially in single target. And if you're running him as a sub DPS, then this will help increase your main DPS's damage too. E3 increases his ultimate, which is his main damage source, and basic attack levels. E4 increases the damage multiplier of each ultimate hit by 6%, a straightforward damage increase to his ultimate. E5 increases his skill and talent levels, and lastly, E6 makes his ultimate give a 30% damage bonus buff until the end of his turn, and the next skill he uses recovers a skill point. Note that he still consumes a skill point, but just recovers one right away. If you're running a team that's especially SP aggressive, this can help alleviate some of your SP consumption. Now let's move on to his Relic build. We'll focus on his main DPS build first, then his support sub DPS build. For the body piece, you'll want either crit rate or crit damage, depending on his crit ratio. Always note any extra crit buffs he will receive during battle. I recommend at least aiming for 60 to 70% crit rate, but more is always nice. Then stack his crit damage as much as you can beyond 100%. For his feat piece, speed is generally recommended for faster turn cycling. He starts at a low base speed of 96 and has no innate speed traces or buffs, so you want to get his speed up to at least 121 as a good early breakpoint, or 134 with better substats. However, if you have other speed sources and or action advancing teammates, then you might be able to make a case for attack. For his planar sphere, ice damage boost or attack are both worth considering. There can be marginal differences in favor of one depending on how much attack or damage percent bonus buffs he's getting, as it's better to balance both rather than just overly invest in one stat. Substat quality matters a lot as well. Then for his link rope, go for attack percent. As for substats, you're mainly looking for crit, attack, and speed. Get as much speed as you need to hit your desired breakpoint or target. It's not urgent to get effect hit rate since his A4 trace already provides an ample amount, but EHR rolls will still be put to some use. As for his relic sets, you can go for flexible 2-piece sets of ice damage, attack, speed, and the new Pioneer set with its 12% damage bonus against debuffed enemies. These allow you an easier farming time to focus on getting the right main stats with the best substats. For full sets, there are 3 options. The 4-piece Pioneer Divers gives a damage bonus and crit bonuses versus enemies with 2 to 3 debuffs on them and more when the user inflicts a debuff. Having another debuffer teammate will allow you to maximize this, and Misha himself has innate ways to apply debuffs at least. At max potential, it's a bit ahead versus the 4-piece Hunter of Glacial Forest. The 4-piece Hunter of Glacial Forest gives ice damage bonus and a 25% crit damage bonus for 2 turns after using his ultimate. And since his ultimate will have 2 to 3 turn rotations anyway, this crit bonus will have high uptime. Of course, the 4-piece Genius of Brilliant Stars is always an option if you already have a good set. The 4-piece effect is the relevant buff, which lets the user ignore 10% of the enemy's defense and 10% more if they have a quantum weakness. Due to how it scales, defense ignore effects are more potent as they stack until 100%, and this synergizes nicely as well with Misha C2. If you have Silver Wolf, you can force a quantum weakness to unlock the relic's full effect. Ultimately, choose which cavern will give you the most farming efficiency for its shared set, and always remember that 2-piece combos with really good substats can still be competitive. As for planar ornaments, your main choices are the Inert Cell Soto for its crit rate and ultimate damage bonuses, Frontline Firmament Glamoth as long as he can reach at least 135 speed, and the Space Sealing Station for its attack bonuses and easier to reach 120 speed requirement. Prioritize the right stats, good substats, and the cavern with the best farming efficiency for other units you're building. The Glamoth and Space Sealing Station sets have more generally efficient to farm worlds thanks to their more universal support set pairings. If you're running him as a hybrid free support sub DPS, then you can start putting more emphasis on other relic stats. An ERR rope better enables rotations that implement more basic attacks but still follow a 3-turn recharge time. More EHR is mainly beneficial in multi-target scenarios since in single or double target scenarios, his innate EHR buff already makes his application generally reliable enough. Speed is also more important as he can now assume the role of an SP positive unit. Then all the other offensive stats are there to further improve his sub DPS damage. The sets previously mentioned can still apply, but now you have other more support oriented options. The 4-piece Eagle of Twilight line relic set for its advanced forward effect just to help him go faster, the ERR planar sets to speed up his energy generation, or the Pan Cosmic set just to double dip on building his EHR. Moving on, let's review his best light cone options. On the Fall of an Aeon from Herta's store is the best default free-to-play option and is still competitive versus limited light cones. It has higher base stats than 4 stars, gives a ton of attack, and the damage bonus condition should be easy to maintain consistently thanks to Misha's fast breaking capabilities. Really, the main issue you might run into is if another destruction unit in your double-sided runs want this as well. But if you can just put it on Misha, then you're pretty much set. For gacha options, Under the Blue Sky has very good potential. It gives a permanent attack buff and a conditional 3-turn crit rate bonus upon the wearer defeating an enemy. As long as there are minions for Misha to easily kill, then the crit rate bonus should see very high uptime. However, it could be an issue when he's up against a wave that's exclusively only elites or bosses. The Mole's Welcome You can be a huge attack stat stick from its stacking effect, especially with high superimpositions. You have to spend a turn using a basic attack to get the full stacks, which is fine in playstyles or rotations where basic attacks are integrated anyway. I expect players will wonder about the new Indelible Promise Destruction Light Cone, which features Misha himself. While it may seem like it should be specifically tailored for him, the break effect bonus it gives is not as potent. The scaling of ice break damage is pretty low, it doesn't affect how long the enemy is frozen, and his attack scalings matter a lot more. So its main benefit is really the 2-turn crit rate bonus after using the ultimate, which can at least have high uptime thanks to Misha's fast recharging time. Something irreplaceable is the standard banner 5-star light cone. It has worse damage potential versus a max superimposed Fall of an Aeon, but it's still viable if you have it. However, the damage bonus effect requires getting hit or defeating an enemy and only lasts 1 turn, so its consistency will be situational. Out of all the 3 limited 5-star light cones, Imbibitor Lunae's signature light cone has the most potential synergy with Misha, but only if used in a very specific way. Basically, you'll have to integrate more basic attacks in his rotation in order to maintain the effect's uptime, and you'll need teammates to skill more frequently to help Misha stack his hits. If you also have the signature light cones of Blade or Jingliu, those will generally be base attack and crit stat sticks since their effect conditions aren't really as synergistic with his playstyle. Next, let's take a look at his team comps and synergies. As a Hypercarry, you're running him with the usual 2 Harmony/Nihility and 1 Sustain template. But in the right scenarios, if you think you can capitalize on freezing and breaking enemies with the right counter elements, it might be possible to give up a Sustain to just run another Harmony or Nihility support and go all in on boosting his damage output. Harmony units generally provide damage-related buffs, while having their own unique utilities that can have extra synergy with him. There are particular ones with exceptional synergy, namely Hanya's SP generation to make it easier to spam skills and generate hits for Misha, Ruan Mei's combined break efficiency and extension buffs to complement the breaking and crowd control utility of Misha, and of course Bronya's and Tingyun's respective advancing and batterying utilities are also very good. The upcoming Sparkle should also be a great fit for him, with her skill point related utilities incentivizing and boosting your team's SP consumption on top of her crit damage buff. Among Nihility, Pela can have amazing synergy as she can inflict AoE defense shred and single target ice resistance reduction, which can really help boost Misha's damage in both multi and single target scenarios. scenarios. Combining their ice damage toughness really makes them a strong breaking combo against ice weak enemies too, and she has a small team EHR bonus which still benefits Misha. Silver Wolf has her single target defense shred and weakness implant, so she's more suited in single target fights. She can also enable a mono ice comp against non-ice weak enemies. Technically, Black Swan can still work for her AoE defense shredding and being a dot sub DPS. And if you want to just delay enemy actions all the way down, you can try combining Welt and Misha to slow and freeze them as much as possible. If you do have imaginary units or even quantum units, it can be better for them to break the enemy instead, so that they can apply their action delay break debuff to push the enemy's turn down, and Misha will apply his freeze afterwards to further delay their broken state. Your sustain depends mainly on who you've invested in, with 5 stars generally being more comfortable. Having very SP positive sustains like Luocha can help feed Misha and your team's SP needs, though even those that are still skill reliant will contribute towards generating hits for him, so there are benefits either way. If you want to start a permafreeze or mono ice team, March or Japard are there to help combine their freezing utilities. You can alternate between your unit's freeze applications, but don't apply 2 instances of freeze, as that makes no difference at all anymore. Then as a support / sub DPS, what Misha provides aside from damage is freezing utility and high toughness damage, especially versus a single target. With Misha having a build that focuses more on spamming his ult, ensuring his freeze, and just going as fast as possible, the idea is to help consolidate his roles for crowd control and damage. The riskier move here is having no abundance or preservation at all. You'll largely rely on Misha's freezes to control the enemy as much as possible and defeat them before they manage to deal enough damage in between their freezes and breaks. While possible, it's not something I generally recommend for most players. It's not as comfortable as just having a really good dedicated sustain support, and with a lot of really good sustain options out there to invest in, you'd have to really consider if it's worth the investment to delegate Misha in this role. Anyway, one main freeze anti-synergy to watch out for is if your main DPS actually benefits from getting hit and taking enemy damage. So units like Clara or Blade, or other future units with similar needs, wouldn't want freezers on their team. If units also have effects that make them not consume skill points like Blade or Jingliu during their special states, or even at all like Arlen who just consumes his HP, then they can't generate hits for Misha as much as other DPSs. On the other hand, there can be mechanics complemented by freeze like dots, where an enemy freezing and thawing will make them receive dots faster. It's even more potent when combined with Ruan Mei, as enemies now have to first recover from both her break extension and Misha's freeze, and they'll take dots in both instances. And again, having his second Eidolon will make him better in this role, as his defense shred debuff will also help amplify his teammates' damage. Lastly, some observations about Misha's auto battle performance. To start, he has predictable behavior wherein he prioritizes using his skill. He generally targets the main elite enemy against enemy mobs, so at least his skill blast damage isn't as wasted, and he uses his ultimate ASAP. Unfortunately, that part about his ultimate is the biggest source of his auto battle inefficiency. This can lead to situations where he uses it with less buffs, or it doesn't allow for allies to apply or refresh their buffs first before he ultimates, thus hitting weaker than he possibly could have and making difficult fights much more slower. When you're trying to auto him as a sub DPS support, it won't be able to implement the more efficient rotations you're probably thinking of in this role, especially the possibility of going for a more basic attack SP generator playstyle. But as long as your main DPS and sustain are capable, then it should be fine. If you try to do a no sustain run with Misha's freeze as your main way of trying to survive, then having the auto battle attempts that might be a death sentence in actual challenging fights. If your team is just really that strong and has the right break counters, it might still be able to complete the fight, but expect everyone to be pretty bruised with possibly a dead member or two. And that's it for this Misha guide. Let me know in the comments what you think of him and how you're planning to build and play him. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!